In the summer of 1974, young women started vanishing from college campuses across the Pacific Northwest. They were last seen talking to a handsome man with his arm in a sling, asking for help with a sailboat. By the time investigators connected the dots, at least 30 women were already dead. And the killer? He was sitting in law school, charming everyone around him. Welcome back to Dark Files. I'm your host, and every week we dive deep into the most disturbing criminal cases in history, because understanding evil is the first step to preventing it. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming. Before we begin, a serious content warning. This video contains detailed discussions of violence against women, sexual assault, and murder. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. If you or someone you know needs support, resources are linked in the description below. Theodore Robert Bundy. The name alone sends chills down the spines of anyone familiar with American true crime. Between 1974 and 1978, Ted Bundy murdered at least 30 young women across 7 states, though the real number is likely much higher. Some investigators believe it could be over 100 victims. What made Bundy different from other serial killers wasn't just his brutality. It was his ability to blend in. He was handsome, educated, articulate. He worked on political campaigns. He volunteered at a suicide prevention hotline. He was studying to become a lawyer. Women trusted him. Society trusted him. And he used that trust to hunt. Bundy's victims were typically college-age women with long, dark hair parted down the middle. He would approach them in public places, parking lots, college campuses, parks, often wearing a fake cast or using crutches. He'd ask for help carrying books to his car or loading a sailboat. Once they were close enough, he'd overpower them, kidnap them, and take them to remote locations where he'd assault and murder them. The investigation that would eventually catch Ted Bundy spans nearly a decade and crosses multiple state lines. It involves missed opportunities, bureaucratic failures, and 2 dramatic escapes from custody. There were moments when police had him in their grasp and let him slip away. There were survivors who gave detailed descriptions that went ignored. And there was a final killing spree in Florida that would cement his place as one of the most notorious criminals in American history. Our story begins in Seattle, Washington, in January 1974. The city was in the middle of a cold, rainy winter. The University of Washington campus was bustling with students returning from winter break. Young women walked freely between dorms and classes, completely unaware that a predator was watching. Ted Bundy was 27 years old. He'd just ended a long-term relationship. He was working part-time at a crisis center while attending law school at the University of Puget Sound. To everyone who knew him, he seemed like the perfect example of a young man going places. Intelligent, charming, ambitious. But behind that carefully constructed facade was something dark, something that had been building for years. And in the early morning hours of January 4th, 1974, that darkness would finally emerge in the most horrific way imaginable. What followed was a reign of terror that would baffle law enforcement, traumatize communities, and change the way America understood serial killers forever. This is the story of Ted Bundy, the charming psychopath. January 4th, 1974. University of Washington student Joni Lenz, 21 years old, is asleep in her basement bedroom when an intruder breaks in. He beats her viciously with a metal rod and sexually assaults her with a foreign object. Miraculously, she survives, though she suffers permanent brain damage and has no memory of the attack. 1 month later, February 1st, Linda and Healy disappears from her bedroom in the same neighborhood. Her bed is carefully made. There's blood on her pillow and nightgown, but her roommates heard nothing. She's never seen alive again. March 12th. Donna Gail Manson, 19, vanishes after leaving her dorm at Evergreen State College to attend a jazz concert. No trace of her is ever found. April 17th. Susan Rancourt, 18, disappears from Central Washington State College. A student reports seeing her talking to a man with his arm in a sling. May 6th. Roberta Kathleen Parks, 22, vanishes from Oregon State University. June 1st. Brenda Ball, 22, leaves a tavern in Burien, Washington, and is never seen again. June 11th. Georgianne Hawkins, 18, disappears from the University of Washington campus. Multiple witnesses report seeing her talking to a young man with crutches who asked for help carrying books to his car. And then comes the case that breaks everything wide open. July 14, 1974. Lake Sammamish State Park. A beautiful Sunday afternoon. Thousands of people are enjoying the sunshine. Janice Ott, 23, is sunbathing when a handsome man with his arm in a sling approaches her. He introduces himself as Ted. He asks if she'll help him load a sailboat onto his car. Several people witness her walking away with him toward the parking lot. 4 hours later, the same man approaches Denise Naslund, 19, in the same park. She also agrees to help him. She also disappears. Both women's remains are found 2 months later in dense woods east of Seattle. And for the first time, police have a name. Ted. Let's talk about the key players in this nightmare. Theodore Robert Bundy. Born November 24, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont, to a single mother. He grew up believing his mother was his sister, and his grandparents were his parents, a family secret meant to avoid shame. He was intelligent, a good student, but struggled with social connections. By his own later admission, he developed disturbing, violent fantasies during adolescence. The victims, at least 30 confirmed, but likely many more. Most were white, college-age women with long, dark hair parted in the middle. They were students, aspiring professionals, daughters, sisters, friends. They had dreams. They had futures. Bundy stole all of that. Detective Bob Keppel, Seattle Police, one of the first investigators to recognize they were dealing with a serial offender. He would spend years tracking Bundy and eventually interview him on death row. Carol Duranch, age 18 in November 1974. She would become one of the few women to escape Ted Bundy alive, and her testimony would be crucial. Elizabeth Klopfer, Bundy's girlfriend from 1969 to 1974. She would call the police multiple times to report her suspicions that her boyfriend might be the killer. She was ignored. By late summer 1974, Washington police had collected dozens of witness reports describing a man named Ted driving a tan Volkswagen Beetle. They had composite sketches that looked remarkably similar across multiple cases. They had a pattern. Young women with similar appearances, all approached with a ruse involving an injury and a request for help. What they didn't have was physical evidence. No fingerprints. No murder weapons. No crime scenes. Bundy was meticulous. He wore gloves. He cleaned his car obsessively. He dumped bodies in remote wilderness areas where they might never be found. But on September 6, 1974, grouse hunters discovered skeletal remains near Issaquah, Washington. Over the next few days, investigators found more bones, personal items, and a crucial clue: animal predators had scattered the remains. But forensic analysis could identify victims. Janice Ott and Denise Naslund were confirmed. So was Georgianne Hawkins. The case was now officially a serial murder investigation. And then, suddenly, the disappearances in Washington stopped because Ted Bundy had moved to Utah to attend law school. October 1974. Bundy relocates to Salt Lake City to attend the University of Utah College of Law. Within weeks, women start disappearing in Utah and Colorado using the exact same pattern. October 18th, Melissa Smith, 17, daughter of the Midvale police chief, vanishes. Her body is found 9 days later in a mountain canyon. October 31st, Laura M., 17, disappears from a Halloween party, found nearly a month later in American Fork Canyon. November 8, 1974. This is the day everything changes. Carol Duranch is shopping at a mall in Murray, Utah, when a man approaches her claiming to be a police officer. He says someone tried to break into her car and asks her to accompany him to the station. She gets into his Volkswagen Beetle. As he drives, she realizes something is wrong. They're not heading toward any police station. He suddenly pulls over and attempts to handcuff her. She fights back. He pulls out a crowbar and swings at her head. She manages to partially block the blow, rolls out of the car and runs into traffic screaming. A couple stops and save her life. That same evening, just a few hours later, 17-year-old Deborah Kent disappears from a high school parking lot in Bountiful, Utah. She's never seen alive again. Carol Durant gives police an incredibly detailed description. She describes a Volkswagen Beetle. She describes a man, handsome, well-dressed, about 5'10", dark hair. She even manages to provide the handcuffs he used. He only got one cuff on her wrist before she escaped. Meanwhile, investigators across multiple states begin comparing notes. The FBI gets involved. They realize the Washington disappearances, the Utah cases, and several murders in Colorado all fit the same pattern. They create a suspect profile: white male, mid-20s to early 30s, intelligent, physically attractive, drives a Volkswagen Beetle, uses charm and fake injuries to gain trust. Anonymous tips flood in. Multiple people call to suggest Ted Bundy, including his girlfriend Elizabeth Klopfer, who has now called police 4 separate times. His name keeps appearing on suspect lists, but he doesn't seem dangerous. He's a law student. He works in politics. Investigators keep moving past his name. Until August 16, 1975. Utah Highway Patrol Officer Bob Hayward spots a Volkswagen Beetle driving slowly through a residential neighborhood at 2:30 a.m. with its headlights off. When he tries to pull it over, it speeds away. After a short chase, the driver stops. It's Ted Bundy. Hayward searches the car. What he finds is chilling: handcuffs, an ice pick, a crowbar, a ski mask, rope, torn strips of sheet, and a pantyhose mask with eye holes cut out. Bundy claims these are normal items, that the handcuffs are for security work. He's arrested anyway. Detective Jerry Thompson shows Carol Durant a photo lineup. She immediately identifies Ted Bundy as her attacker. Police also find hair samples in Bundy's car that are consistent with Melissa Smith. On March 1st, 1976, Ted Bundy is convicted of aggravated kidnapping in the Carol Durant case and sentenced to 1 to 15 years in prison. Prosecutors in Colorado are simultaneously building murder cases against him. June 7, 1977. While acting as his own attorney during pretrial hearings in Colorado, Bundy is allowed to use the courthouse law library unsupervised. He jumps from a second-story window and escapes. He's recaptured 8 days later. December 30th, 1977. Bundy escapes again, this time from a cell in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. He loses 35 pounds to squeeze through a hole in the ceiling, crawls through the duct system, and drops into the apartment of the chief jailer, who is out for the evening. He walks out the front door. This time, he makes it much farther. He boards a plane to Chicago, then takes a train to Michigan, steals a car, and drives all the way to Florida. He rents an apartment near Florida State University in Tallahassee under a false name. Free and undetected, Bundy's control completely deteriorates. January 15, 1978, 2:45 a.m. Bundy breaks into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. In less than 15 minutes, he attacks 4 women with a piece of oak firewood. Margaret Bowman, 21, and Lisa Levy, 20, are beaten to death in their beds. Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler survive with severe injuries. Less than an hour later, Bundy breaks into another apartment a few blocks away and attacks Cheryl Thomas, a dance student. She survives but suffers permanent hearing loss. February 9, 1978. 12-year-old Kimberly Leach disappears from her junior high school in Lake City, Florida. Her partially mummified body is found 8 weeks later in an abandoned pig shed. February 15, 1978. Pensacola police officer David Lee pulls over a Volkswagen Beetle for erratic driving. The driver tries to run. After a struggle, he's arrested. When they run his name, they realize they've just caught Ted Bundy. This time, there'll be no escape. Underscore, 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 underscore. Ted Bundy's trial became a media sensation, some of the first to be televised nationally, and Bundy loved every second of it. He fired his attorneys and represented himself, playing the role of a brilliant legal mind fighting for his life. He cross-examined witnesses. He gave opening and closing statements. He proposed to his girlfriend Carol in Boone during the courtroom proceedings, and under Florida law at the time, this constituted a legal marriage. But the evidence was overwhelming. At the Chi Omega trial, prosecutors presented forensic odontology bite mark evidence. Ted Bundy had left bite marks on Lisa Levy's body. Dental experts testified that the marks matched Bundy's teeth with what they claimed was scientific certainty. Though bite mark analysis has since been discredited, at the time it was revolutionary and devastating. Witnesses placed Bundy near the sorority house. Fibers from the Chi Omega victims were found in his stolen van. Pantyhose similar to the masks he'd used before were discovered in his possession. July 24th, 1979. Ted Bundy is convicted of the Chi Omega murders and sentenced to death by electrocution. February 10th, 1980. He is convicted of killing Kimberly Leach and receives a second death sentence. For nearly a decade, Bundy sat on death row, filing appeal after appeal, giving interviews and maintaining his innocence. He became a celebrity. He granted interviews to journalists, authors, and psychologists. He discussed criminal psychology, offering profiles of other serial killers while refusing to admit his own guilt. But as his execution date approached in January 1989, Bundy finally began to confess. In a series of interviews with investigators, particularly Detective Bob Keppel, Bundy admitted to 30 murders across 7 states. He drew maps showing where he dumped bodies. He provided details only the killer could know. He described returning to dump sites to apply makeup to corpses and engage in necrophilia. He talked about keeping severed heads in his apartment as trophies. He admitted that his first attempted kidnapping was at age 14, and his first actual murder might have occurred even earlier than investigators believed. Bundy claimed he was driven by an addiction to violent pornography and alcohol. Psychologists diagnosed him as a classic psychopath, charming, manipulative, completely lacking in empathy. Some experts believe he killed more than 100 women. We'll never know the true number. January 24th, 1989. At 7:16 a.m., Theodore Robert Bundy was executed in the electric chair at Florida State Prison. He was 42 years old. Outside the prison, crowds gathered, some holding signs that read, "Burn Bundy, burn," and "Tuesday is Friday." His final words were to his attorney. He said, "Give my love to my family and friends." The families of his victims felt a mixture of relief and continued anguish. Some believed justice was served. Others felt that his death would never bring back the daughters, sisters, and friends they'd lost. The Bundy case fundamentally changed how law enforcement approaches serial murder investigations. It exposed the dangers of jurisdictional boundaries preventing information sharing. It led to the creation of the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, or VICAP, which helps link similar crimes across different regions. It also changed public perception. Before Bundy, people imagined serial killers as obviously disturbed loners. Bundy shattered that myth. He proved that a killer could be educated, charming, and successful, someone who could blend seamlessly into society while committing unspeakable acts. And Rule, the famous true crime author, worked alongside Bundy at that suicide hotline in Seattle. She later wrote, "The Stranger Beside Me," one of the most chilling accounts of the case precisely because she knew him personally and never suspected him. Several of Bundy's victims have never been found. Families still search for answers, and experts continue to study the case, trying to understand what creates such evil. It's important to remember that Ted Bundy craved attention. Even in death, his notoriety is exactly what he wanted. That's why focusing on the victims, not the killer, matters. These were real people with real lives that were stolen from them. Margaret Bowman wanted to be a fashion designer. Lisa Levy was studying to be a teacher. Kimberly Leach was 12 years old and loved gymnastics. George Ann Hawkins was engaged to be married. We study cases like this not to glorify killers, but to understand how to protect potential victims and improve our justice system. We remember the names of those who were lost, not just the name of the one who took them. If this video gave you insight into one of history's most notorious cases, please hit that like button and subscribe to Dark Files. We upload new deep dive true crime documentaries every week, and your support helps us continue this important work. Check out the video appearing on screen right now. It covers another case that changed criminal investigation forever. And if you want to support victims' advocacy organizations, I've linked several reputable resources in the description below.